Namaste. This lecture is about Bhakti in the Bhagavad Gītā, which is a very central topic. So, in many ways, Bhakti, this is the main innovation offered by the Bhagavad Gītā and its major component. Bhakti ties together the entire text in many ways, and this is also the Hindu version of universalism. Within the Gita, it serves as the elevating force, pulling one upwards, so to speak, along with the Gita's ethical ladder. Medieval theorists of Bhakti, such as Rupa Goswami, have analyzed Bhakti in terms of Vaidhi and Raga Nuga. Apparently, the Bhakti found in the Gita is archaic and scholastic, a scholastic form of Bhakti, and not as complex or as sophisticated as the form articulated some 2 millennia after its early and somewhat robust articulation in the Bhagavad Gītā. In characterizing the archaic form of Bhakti in the Gita, Freedom Hardy, who's an important scholar, considers the attribute intellectual to may not do full justice to the phenomenon of Bhakti as it appears in the early text, but he still employs it in order to stress the far-reaching difference of this form of Bhakti from the later emotional variety. However, despite its scholastic and yogic form, it may well be that the roots of these ideas may have already been there in the Bhagavad Gītā, at least implicitly, and as such could have served as the foundation of that which was later developed in texts such as the Bhagavata Purana, and further developed by medieval theorists. Rupa Goswami indeed developed a theology of Bhakti based upon dramaturgical theories. Apparently, some dramatic elements are to be found already in the Bhagavad Gītā, especially in the Avatar section and chapter 11. Apparently, Bhakti is not of one type. Rather, it takes various forms. It can be mixed, Mishra, with various components, specifically karma, yoga, and jnana. There's at least implicitly a structure, or perhaps a kind of ladder leading from these 3 forms of mixed bhakti to the 4th form of pure or unmixed bhakti. This lecture aspires to uncover these early forms of bhakti in the Bhagavad Gītā and highlight their inner dynamics, which were apparently developed later by various theorists. As such, one section exemplifying each of these 4 types of bhakti is chosen, and I will offer some commentary. The Sanskrit term bhakti is most often translated in English as devotion, and bhakti marga, the path of devotion, is understood to be one major type of Hindu spiritual practice. This is by a famous scholar called Karman. Klostermaier, very important scholar, notes that grammatically the bhakti is an abstract noun formed by adding the suffix kti to one of 2 different verbal roots. If derived from the root bhanj, to separate, bhakti would have to be translated as separation. That makes sense insofar as bhakti presupposes that the individual human person is separated from and not identical with the Supreme Being. In this view, inner longing for reunion is the characteristic of human life, and the bhakta is one who is aware of the painful separation between humans and God and tries to overcome it. The majority of scholars, however, derive bhakti from the root bhaj, to worship, to be devoted to. This too makes sense since bhakti religion consists of acts of worship and loving devotion towards God. Kyukazu Kita, the scholar, notes that in considering bhakti to be the feminine noun based on the verbal root bhaj, it might be defined as complete dedication to the object of worship through the act of service. The notion of bhakti is deeply rooted in intellectual, literary, artistic, and performative traditions of South Asia, although in Vaishnava traditions, the idea of bhakti is most developed. While we find the idea of dedication to Vishnu in the Katha Upanishad and dedication to Shiva in the Shvetashvatara Upanishad, The earliest systematic discourse on the notion of bhakti is found in the Bhagavad Gītā, that is by the scholar Gita. Apparently, the bhakti of the Gita is not simple, rather it is complex. As this lecture aspires to uncover these early gradings and categorizations of bhakti, it will seek help from medieval texts, Narada Bhakti Sutras, as well as from the theories of bhakti, Ramanuja and Jiva and Rupa Goswamis. Julius Lipner, an important scholar of Hinduism, considers the Narada Bhakti Sutras, consisting of only about 84 sutras, to be a masterpiece on bhakti. This text, Narada Bhakti Sutras, is ascribed to the sage Narada, who is supposed to have lived in ancient times. It is the work of more than one unknown hand and can be dated to about the 10th, 12th century CE. Sutra 82 is particularly relevant for our purposes. And now I'm reading the sutra. I will share a screen so you can follow. This is a very interesting analysis of bhakti. So this is from the Narada Bhakti Sutra. Though bhakti is one, it has 11 forms. It is of the form of the attachment to the greatness of the divine qualities, the attachment to the divine forms, the attachment to the worship of the divine image, the attachment to remembering deity, the attachment to the service of the deity, the attachment to the divine companionship, the attachment of parental affection, the attachment of the beloved, the attachment of self-offering, the attachment of being suffused by the deity, and the attachment of the most profound separation. So that is an analysis of bhakti through the Narada Bhakti Sutra. And now I will quote Edwin Bryant, who was an important scholar of bhakti. In analyzing bhakti, Edwin Bryant follows Jiva Goswami in distinguishing Vaidhi Bhakti from Raga Nuga Bhakti. He writes that in the Bhakti Sandarbha, Jiva structures his analysis of Bhakti Yoga around a twofold categorization, Vaidhi Bhakti and Raga Nuga Bhakti. Vaidhi Bhakti is devotion prompted by scriptural rules and prescriptions, and it consists of regulated practices established by tradition. Raganuga Bhakti manifests in the case of very rare souls in the form of devotion that has no need for following prescribed or formalized methods, but rather results spontaneously from natural, innate attraction, raga, for Ishvara. This is by Edwin Bryant. This distinction is interesting in that it establishes the principle according to which bhakti is generally supported by other elements. In this case, it is supported by scriptural injunctions or vidhis, which seem to serve as a framework based upon which bhakti is practiced. Apparently, practicing bhakti in itself without support is quite difficult, and it can be practiced only by rare souls who are able to rise to the platform of Raga Nuga Bhakti. Mixed bhakti is also termed Mishra Bhakti, the term Mishra meaning mixed, blended, or combined. As such, this chapter, or this lecture, is engaged with the three systems of mixed bhakti in the Bhagavad Gītā, which are Dharma Mishra Bhakti, Yoga Mishra Bhakti, and Jnana Mishra Bhakti. Dharma Mishra Bhakti, or you already know, I equate that with Karma Mishra Bhakti. We also use the term supported bhakti in that, as mentioned, these three paths support bhakti by offering it a framework within which it could be expressed. Edwin Bryant further distinguishes between these two states of bhakti and writes that vidhi is the method adopted by the vast majority of practitioners to strive to cultivate bhakti, while raga nuga stems from inherent attraction unmediated by regulations, at least in this life. Bryant further writes that the type of Raga in Raga Nuga reflects the highest type of yogic attainment in the system, since it is focused exclusively on Ishvara, and it is not to be confused with mundane desire. The Raga of Patanjali, for example, which stemming from ignorance is focused on the body and mind and is an obstacle to yoga. So now, this lecture, as I mentioned, will be divided into 4 divisions or sections. Bhakti support by Dharma or Dharmic devotion, Bhakti support by Yoga or Yogic devotion, and Bhakti support by Jnana or Jnana-oriented devotion. So all these I mentioned, and the last section will be unsupported Bhakti or pure devotion. Roughly, the first 3 categories correspond to that which was later termed Vaidhi Bhakti, whereas the 4th category roughly corresponds to that which was later termed Raga Nuga Bhakti. Textual analysis shows that the distinction is not that clear. Rather, there are various mixtures of these categories. But overall, we believe these categories do serve the purpose of categorizing the various types of devotion in the Gita. So now we will discuss Bhakti supported by Dharma. So now we will highlight the theme of devotion supported by Dharma, which serves as the unifying thread of the entire Bhagavad Gita. As argued in chapter 2, the concept of the lecture to chapter 2 of the book, the concept of Dharma in the Gita is multidimensional. It is grounded in the Vedic humanistic concept. It absorbs yogic elements. Then it becomes karma yoga. Eventually, even when it becomes a liberate form of bhakti or devotion, it still maintains the basic varnashrama framework. So here is a section from the 18th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, and this section summarizes these dynamics all the way from its lower stages through its intermediate yogic stage and eventually up to its bhakti or devotional stage. And I share screen. I'm reading from the 18th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, verse 45. Being inspired to perform his own dharmic duty, one attains perfection. Here now how he becomes successful through contentment in following his own duty, by worshipping through adhering to his own duty, him from whom all beings have originated and by whom this whole universe is pervaded. One reaches perfection. Better to perform one's own duty imperfectly than another's dharma perfectly, as when one performs the duties prescribed for his own nature, he incurs no evil. Although action is by nature deficient, it should nevertheless not be relinquished, as fault accompanies every enterprise, even as smoke covers fire. He whose intelligence is unattached in all respects, who has conquered himself and whose desires are gone, attains the highest perfection of actionlessness through renunciation. O Kuntiya, having attained perfection, learn from me in brief how he attains Brahman, the supreme state of knowledge. Absorbed in thought in highest reality with the help of his purified intellect, restraining himself with determination, having relinquished the sense objects such as sound and others, and casting aside attraction and repulsion alike, residing in solitude, eating lightly, restraining his speech, body, and mind, constantly absorbed in meditation, taking refuge in dispassion, freed from egotism, aggressiveness, pride, lust, anger, and accusativeness, considering nothing to be his own and quite at peace, he becomes fit from Brahman realization. When his whole being becomes one with Brahman, he is pervaded by a deep peace, and he grieves not, nor does he crave. He becomes impartial to all creatures and attains supreme devotion unto me. That's Krishna speaking. Through devotion, he comes to know me as I truly am, having actually realized me. He immediately attains me. Although always engaged in various activities, taking refuge in me, he attains by my grace the eternal, imperishable abode. Just depend upon me in all activities, behold me to be the supreme, taking refuge in the yoga of enlightenment. Be constantly absorbed in me. Absorbed in me, you shall overcome all hardships by my grace. If, however, being under the influence of the ego, you will not listen to me, you will be lost. If overcome by your ego, you should think, I shall not fight, this resolution would prove in vain, as your own nature will compel you to do so. Okontia, bound by the qualities of work emanating from your own nature, you will be doing helplessly that which you try to avoid out of illusion. So, wonderful verses summarizing the Bhagavad Gita, that's the 18th chapter, and they all support this idea of Dharma, Bhakti mixed with Dharma. The first two verses, 44, 45, 46, articulate the section's main theme. Accordingly, one can attain perfection by worshipping the Supreme through the performance of his dharmic duty. One can worship the Supreme through performing one's dharma. As this type of worship is supported by one's dharmic duty, it is bhakti mixed with or supported by dharma. Here we have bhakti supported by dharma. In articulating this theme, this section follows the Gita's ethical ladder and ascends through the three metaphysical tiers of reality. Verses 45, 47, 48 reinforce the doctrine of adhering to one's dharmic duty even imperfectly, and repeat almost verbatim this major theme appearing in verse 335. This theme of adhering to one's dharma even imperfectly is also implicit in verse 247. Remember, karmani eva dikaraste, according to which your sole entitlement is to perform dharma activity, not ever to possess its fruits. In other words, one should stick to his or her dharmic duties regardless of the consequences or the fruits. This sense of performing one's duty for its own sake carries with it a devotional flavor that is directed towards dharma, but later, as one ascends the ethical ladder, is sublimated and turns into bhakti. You see, one practices bhakti support by dharma, and then that gets purified, and eventually it leads to pure bhakti. The text ascends higher into the second tier and promotes actionlessness and renunciation through adherence to dharma. Verses 50 to 54 describe a further ascension to the second tier to the third, culminating in the attainment of Brahman. From the stage of Brahman, he ascends further, attains devotion, and gets to know Krishna as he really is. Verse 56 reinforces this idea of devotion expressed or practiced through performing various activities, dharmic activities apparently, as opposed to solitary meditation and withdrawal from the world. These activities are apparently dharmic activities, and Krishna invites Arjuna to depend upon him while performing these activities. Chaitasa sarvakarmani mai sanyasya matparaha buddhyuga pashvitya machita satatam bhava. All beautiful verses. This sense of dependence deepens the devotional sentiment and the close personal relations attained by the sort of bhakti supported by dharma. Finally, Krishna presents an argument with the aim of convincing Arjuna to adhere to this path. Accordingly, if Arjuna were to reject this path of devotional dharma, he would fight anyway, helplessly, compelled by his nature. As such, it would be better to practice this devotional dharma, attain close relations with Krishna, and consequently attain by his grace the eternal and imperishable abode. So this section well exemplifies how dharmic duty is gradually sublimated and ultimately turns into devotional service unto the Supreme Person. The famous scholar Zeno notes this and writes that what is new, however, is that Krishna picks out the performance of caste duty, dharma, varnashram dharma, as being perhaps the only perfectly acceptable worship of himself. because he is the author of the ancient social system that divides men into 4 classes of Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Shudras. To do only duty in accordance with the state into which one is born is to conform to the will of God. So here, the famous scholar Zehner supposed this idea that by performing Varnashrama Dharma, one can turn that into devotion and eventually reach a pure bhakti. So now we'll discuss the second section, and that is bhakti supported by yoga, bhakti yoga. The combination of bhakti and yoga is central to the Gita, and from it emerged the term bhakti yoga, which represents devotion supported by yoga. The following section well exemplifies this concept of devotion supported by yoga. It is no doubt devotional, as its goal and focus is the attainment of Krishna at the time of death, but its emphasis or technique is clearly yogic. So now I'm going to quote the 8th chapter, 8.6. Every state of being remembered at the final moment when one relinquishes his body, that very state he will surely go, or kuntiya. Through transformation of his own being. Yam yam vapi smran bhavam tyajat yante kalevaram tamtam eveti kuntiya sadat bhava bhavita. Therefore, at all times, remember me and fight with your mind and intelligence absorbed in me. You will come to me without doubt. O Partha, now hear about the yogi practice. He who meditates on the Supreme Divine Person through constant yoga practice with an unswerving consciousness, he goes to him. One should meditate on him as the ancient seer, as the controller, as smaller than the atom, as the supporter of all, as having an inconceivable form, as brilliant as the sun and beyond darkness. His mind unwavering, absorbed in devotion, supported by the strength of yoga, his life air focused between the eyebrows, one who is thus established at the hour of death, reaches that Supreme Divine Person. Now I shall explain to you briefly the path leading to the abode known by the sages of the Veda as the imperishable. Ascetics desiring this abode practice celibacy, and once freed from passion, they enter it. When all the body's gates are under control, when the mind is restrained in the heart, when the life air is held within the head, at that time one is established in yogic concentration. So he who leaves the body while pronouncing the single syllable, which is Brahman, the Om, while meditating on me, reaches the supreme goal. O Partha, I am easily reached by the yogi who always remembers me. See, that's devotional yoga. Constantly and fully absorbed in me, and thus ever yoked. Having come to me, these great souls do not again undergo rebirth into the transit abode of misery, as they have attained the highest perfection. Mamopetya punarajanma dukhalaya mashashvatam napnuvanti mahatmana samsiddhim paramam gatam. So that's really a description of bhakti yoga, yoga and bhakti, all connected together, or if you like, devotion supported by yoga. This section first establishes a fundamental principle according to which one's mental state at the hour of death determines one's next life. It then offers a type of yogic meditation focused on the Supreme, the goal of which is to leave the body remembering Krishna. Accordingly, the Supreme Divine Person should be meditated as the ancient seer, as the controller, as smaller than the atom, as the supporter of all, as having an inconceivable form, as brilliant as the sun and beyond darkness. Having achieved this, the devotional yogi doesn't undergo further rebirth. rather reaches Krishna's abode, which is the highest perfection. Having raised the subject matter of contemplation or meditation upon the Supreme Person, the text proceeds to elaborate on how this should be done and what its fruit, what the fruit of such meditation. What is the fruit of such meditation? The term abhyasa is mentioned in verse 8. Abhyasa yoga yuktina chaitasa nanyagamina paramam purusham divyam yati paratamuchintaya. It is a central concept of the yoga school describing repeated exercise. It appears in the Yoga Sutra. Okay. Patanjali defined yoga as chitta vritti nirodha, restraint of the vrittis, the changing state of mind. Having explained what constitutes a vritti, he now turns his attention to nirodha, restraint. Anyhow, I will not bring too much, but the idea is that abhyasa and viragya, abhyasa, viragya, abhyam, practice and detachment are central. These are the two ingredients as indicated by Patanjali in the Yoga Sutra. That's by Bryant. At any rate, the term abhyasa mentioned here comprises a central component in the practice of yoga, and when applying it to meditation on the Supreme, it becomes devotion supported by yoga. So that's all a discussion of Bhakti Yoga, or Bhakti supported by yoga. So now we'll discuss the next section, that is Bhakti supported by Jnana, by knowledge. So we will start this section with Krishna delineating the history of the knowledge he is propounding. That's fourth chapter. Accordingly, he had passed this knowledge of yoga to humanity in the distant past, and now he passes this very same knowledge to Arjuna. The latter's qualification for receiving this knowledge is his close relationship with Krishna, since Arjuna is his devoted follower and concurrently his friend. So here we can see the fourth chapter. The Blessed Lord said, I propound this imperishable yoga to Vivasvat, the sun god. Vivasvat in turn imparted to Manu, the father of mankind, and Manu instructed Ikshraku in it. In this way, this knowledge was transmitted through a traditional succession of disciples, and as such, it has become known to the wise kings. However, over a long period on earth, this yoga has been lost, O Parantapa. And now impart this same self-ancient yoga to you, for you are my devotee as well as my friend. Indeed, this is his ultimate mystery. Arjuna said, as your birth was later, whereas Vivasvat's birth was earlier, how can I comprehend that you taught him this wisdom in the distant past? The Blessed Lord said, many births have I passed, and so did you, O Arjuna. I know all of them, but you know not, O Parantapa. Although I was never born, and I myself am imperishable, and although I am the Lord of all beings, when I take on material nature that I own and control, I come into being through my own supernal power. Indeed, whenever the declining dharma occurs and a surge of a dharma, then I myself appear to rescue the good and the pious, to destroy evildoers, and to establish dharma. I myself ascend age after age. He who thus knows in truth of my divine birth and deeds after leaving his body is not brought to birth again, rather to me goes. Janma karma chame divyam evam yo veti tatvataha tyaktavadeham punar janma naiti mam eti sorjuna veti. Knows. That's the emphasis here. We're talking about jnana, yoga, knowledge, yoga. Arjuna, freed from desire, fear, and anger, absorbed in me and seeking refuge in me, many became purified through the fire of wisdom and have thus attained my nature. As they surrender unto me, I reward them accordingly. In any case, men follow my path in all respects. So that is a central section which describes the connection between bhakti and knowledge. Zainer notes that this is the first time in the Bhagavad Gītā the root bhaj, from which bhakti is derived, is significant as it highlights the conjunction of devotion and knowledge, the result of which is bhakti supported by jnana. As part of knowledge Krishna delivers, he dramatically records his divinity and declares his position as the supreme ruler of all, possessing supernatural powers. All these verses we just read. Krishna continues to deliver knowledge of the famous avatar theme, whereas dharma is weakened or harmed and adharma is on the rise. There and then he himself appears for the purpose of his appearance, and the purpose of his appearance is re-establishment of dharma, the protection of the pious, and the destruction of the evildoers. Next, Krishna declares that he who knows, Veti, the nature of his birth and deeds attains liberation. Apparently, many in the past who were in possession of this liberating knowledge were purified by the fire of this wisdom and were thus fortunate to reach Krishna. So that's all very interesting. So the theme of devotion, supported by knowledge, appears also at the chapter's conclusion. We're talking about the 4th chapter, according to which this knowledge leads to the vision of all living beings in the self and also within Krishna. I'm sharing screen again, and now I'm reading the end of the 4th chapter, 33. The sacrifice of knowledge is superior to the offering of material possessions, O Parantapa, as the peak of all activities without exception is the attainment of knowledge. Know this by falling at the feet of the master, asking questions and offering service. In so doing, men of wisdom and vision of the truth will impart knowledge unto you. Tad vidhi pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya upadekshati te jnanam jnaninastat vadarshina. This very famous verse, 434, talks about receiving knowledge from the Tattvadarshina, those who are self-realized. Endowed with this knowledge, you will not fall again into delusion or son of Prabhu, and shall see all living beings in the self and also within me. So that's a beautiful section. And interestingly, the cultivation of knowledge is considered to comprise a sacrifice in itself. And this knowledge sacrifice is considered higher than the sacrifice of material possessions. This devotional knowledge is obtained from the Guru, who represents the unbroken succession of teachers called Parampara. In order to acquire such knowledge, the student must prostrate himself at the feet of the master, ask him questions, and provide him with personal services. Serving the Guru not only provides the disciple with devotional knowledge, but also enables him or her to practice devotion in the mood of servitude. Eventually, this knowledge leads to envisioning all living beings as situated in the self and at the same time also within Krishna. This comprises a devotional mystical vision supported by knowledge. This theme is further reinforced in chapter 7, where Krishna classifies 4 kinds of devotees and considers the jnani, or the wise, to be the best. I'm sharing screen. So this is 7:16. 4 kinds of pious men worship me, O Arjuna: the distressed, the seeker of knowledge, the seeker of wealth, and the wise. The highest among them is the wise, who is devoted to me alone and always absorbed in me. For I am very dear to him, and he is dear to me. Noble indeed are all of them, but the wise I deem to be my very self, for he is firmly established as a soul absorbed in me alone, and I am his highest goal. At the end of many births, the wise surrenders unto me, meditating that Vasudeva is all. Difficult is it indeed to find such a great soul. Beautiful verse. Bahunam Janmanam Ante Jnanavan Mam Prapadyate Vasudeva Sarvam Iti Sa Mahatma Sudurlabha. So this is the Jnanavan, the Jnani, someone who has knowledge. His Jnana Yoga leads him to surrender. First, he gets the knowledge, Vasudeva Sarvam, that's his meditation, and he surrenders, Prapadyate. Beautiful. So, apparently, 4 types of devotees. Of the 4 types of devotees, the wise, the Jnani, is considered by Krishna to be the highest and dearest to him. As such, possessing knowledge of jnana has indeed helped this devotee to become close to Krishna and most dear to him. The scholar Angelica Balidan, she notes that this internal differentiation of devotees bhakta according to the degrees of knowledge is put forward in this classification. 2 of the 4 modis of bhakti are connected with knowledge, that of the seeker of knowledge, jigyasu, and that of the knower, jnani. According to Zainer, Krishna insists that the integrated yukta man who, even after liberation, does not cease to practice spiritual exercise must be possessed of correct knowledge, and in addition must love and worship him alone. So that's Zainer. So that was the section about Jnana Mishra Bhakti. And that indeed comprises a path in itself, and that leads to pure and unsupported devotion. So we have been discussing Karma Mishra Bhakti, or as I call it, Dharma Mishra Bhakti, because I equate karma and dharma. And then Yoga Mishra Bhakti, or devotion supported by yoga, Bhakti Yoga. And then Jnana Mishra Bhakti, devotion supported by knowledge, by jnana. And now we're coming to the 4th type, and that is the unsupported bhakti. Bhakti which is unsupported or pure devotion. So I will look at this section, the section which concludes chapter 9. This undoubtedly comprises one of the peaks of the entire Bhagavad Gītā, in that it presents the stage of unsupported devotion, or bhakti, to the Supreme Person. This type of devotion is not supported nor mixed with jnana and doesn't require intellectual ability. It is not supported by austere yoga practice, nor by sacrificial performance or dharmic performance. Rather, all that is required for achieving these personal relations with Supreme is a pure heart. Now, this is unsupported bhakti, and that requires a pure heart. The bhakta does not need to perform sacrifices, do great dharmic deeds, nor be a great yogi, nor be a great jnani, but a pure heart is sufficient. 9:26. When one offers me in devotion a leaf, a flower, a fruit, a water, I accept that loving is offering, as it is rendered out of a pure heart. Patram pushpam param toyam yom bhaktya prayachati tadaham bhakti uparitam ashnami prayatatmanaham. Beautiful. Whatever you do, whatever you eat, whatever you offer in sacrifice, whatever you give away, and whatever austerity you may practice, O Kuntiya, do it as an offering unto me. Yat karosh yadashnasi yad juhoshi dadasyat yat tapaspasi kuntiya tat kurushva madal panam. Thus, he will be freed from the bondage of actions, along with its auspicious and inauspicious fruits. Wholly absorbed in yoga of renunciation, you shall become liberated and come to me. I am equal to all beings, as I hate no one, nor is anyone dear to me. However, those who worship me and devotedly are in me, and I am in them, too. Even the habitual evildoer, when mixed in devotion to me, is to be held a saint, for his conviction is right. Quickly does he become established on the path of Dharma and attains everlasting peace. O Kuntiya, know for certain that my devotees shall never be destroyed. Those who take refuge in me, be they of lowly origin, women, merchants, and even servants, even they may attain the highest destination. And how much the more the saintly Brahmins and the enlightened and devoted kings. Therefore, having reached this temporary and miserable world, devote yourself to me. Always think of me and become my devotee. Worship me and pay your homage unto me. Thus yoke to me and intent on me as your highest goal, you shall come to me. These are beautiful verses talking about pure bhakti, unsupported bhakti. Krishna commences by declaring that he accepts the sacrifice offered by a pure-hearted and devoted person, even though it may be as simple as a leaf, a flower, a fruit, or water. He then requests Arjuna to perform all his worldly activities as a service unto him and promises a consequent release from all shackles of action, both good and bad. There seems to be a difference between these two stages, in that in verse 26, pure and unmixed devotion, that is represented there, whereas verse 27 represents slightly a lower stage of bhakti, in which one follows his or her tendency of work, confining by one's guna and karma nature. And in that capacity, offers the fruits of work to Krishna. In referring to verse 26, Freedom Hardy, comments that bhakti here motivates and justifies a certain form of offering about which we hear nothing more in the Gita, and which it could be argued is regarded as crude and rudimentary. However, other sources show that this particular religious expression was by no means marginal to Indian society. What Krishna is alluding to is in fact so basic to something here he calls folk religion. So that's Hardy. And he no doubt makes a good point in differentiating this new form of simple and pure devotion from the sophisticated Vedic rituals apparently representing Mimamsa. Mimamsa's main interest was practical rather than speculative, as it inquired into the nature of Dharma and means of Dharma. The devotion described here is different, as it has no practical aims and is neither speculative, jnana, oriented, rather it represents pure and unmixed devotion. The scholar Nicholas Sutton, he knows that it is in this passage and the opening verse of chapter 10 that Krishna's discourse on devotion to the Supreme Deity reaches its ultimate conclusion. There's nothing of this kind to be found in any of the major Upanishads, and it is the emphasis placed on the idea of personal God and loving devotion to that God that marks the Gita out as being such an important text in the development of Hindu religious thought. So that's scholars are also very impressed by this section and consider it all very central to the Gita. Here, Judas Lipno, he knows that practicing bhakti through acts of devotional love is not only religiously effective, but also congenial to our debased human nature. Hence, it is now the chief means to salvation. And the Gita appears to support this idea. Those who take refuge in me, declares Krishna, base-born though they may be, women, Vaishyas, even Shudras, walk the highest way. That's by Julius Nipter. And Lipner also notes that the increasingly popular bhakti traditions, beginning with concession of the Gita, 932, to grant even the base-born who take refuge in Krishna access to the highest way. Let's support the view that status confirmed by caste at birth should not be determinative of one's salvific prospects. Okay, so that is this section about pure bhakti or unsupported bhakti. Now, I'd like to speak briefly, maybe even mention briefly, the medieval bhakti tradition. Medieval bhakti tradition is much later, but all I want to say here in this section is that in the medieval bhakti tradition, bhakti was translated or comprehended through dramatic elements. And all I want to say is that these dramatic elements are already there in the Bhagavad Gītā. So in the Bhagavad Gītā, we can find dramatic elements which were later absorbed in the medieval bhakti tradition. And the bhakti tradition developed a whole rasa theory and rasa theology, which the foundations are already there in the Bhagavad Gītā. So perhaps I will quote some dramatic passages, and I may quote a little from the 11th chapter of the Bhagavad Gītā. So this is a very dramatic section, 11th chapter. I will not read the whole, but just a little. Sanjaya said, having heard Keshava's words, frightened and trembling, offering obeisance to Krishna again and again with folded hands, Arjuna spoke in his great turmoil. Arjuna said, it's only proper, Rishikesh, that the world rejoices and delights in your phrase, that the demons flee in all directions, and that all throngs perfected ones bow to you. O great soul, why should they not bow down before you? You are the primeval creator, greater than even Brahma. I skip a little and I read from verse 40. My homage from the front, my homage from the behind. I offer my homage to you from all directions. O unlimited vigor and infinite mighty you are. You pervade everything, and thus you are everything. Rashly think you to be my comrade. I have addressed you, O Krishna, O Yadava, O my friend, without knowing this greatness of yours. I have done so in absence of mind, or perhaps out of sheer affection. At times I have jested, at times I have treated you disrespectfully. Sometimes we enjoyed ourselves together, lay in the same bed, sat together, or dined together. And not only privately, O Krishna, but with others as well. O immeasurable one, I beg your forgiveness. You are the universal Father of the unmoving and the unmoving alike. O most venerable Guru you are, unequaled and to be worshipped by all. So I skip that, but I do want to make a point here. And the point here is that this section, I'm following a scholar called Dula Wolf, that it's indeed imbued with dramatic elements. And I will not go into Bharat Natya Shastra and analyze the various emotions, the bhavas, but I will not go into that now. But of course, some of them, okay, I will mention a little, bhaya, fear, wonder, vismaya, bibhatsa, astonishment. Many such emotions could be found in these sections. And the conclusion is that apparently these dramaturgical elements found by medieval theories of bhakti, they already exist in a robust form in the Bhagavad Gītā. So that makes a connection between the Bhagavad Gīta's bhakti and medieval bhakti. That was the point I want to make. So in summary, I try to divide this lecture into three sections: karma or dharma supported bhakti, and then yoga supported bhakti, and then jnana supported bhakti, knowledge supported bhakti, bhakti supported by knowledge, and eventually we came to pure or unsupported bhakti, which is the peak of the Bhagavad Gītā. And then later I made a short argument saying that the roots of the medieval aesthetic tradition of bhakti, that is found already in the Bhagavad Gītā. So we'll stop here, and thank you very much.